I'll talk about, or I have talked about, a bit about amalgamations. That's something else I've been involved in. And then I'll talk a little bit about running for mayor and where I see myself going in regards to what I want to help this community, our community, achieve here at Nelson. But I guess first a little bit about me. Not many people know, they see my name and they think he's either from Japan or he's come from somewhere, they're not too sure who this fella is. But I was born here in Nelson at the hospital, down here at the public hospital, and my first home was actually in Stoke when I was a baby. Then we moved to Trafalgar Street, and then we moved to Grove Street to grow tomatoes like a lot of the Italians did here in Nelson. And my father was born in Italy, but my mum was born here in Nelson too. Her parents came out from Italy back in like 1922. They came out here, and my grandfather raised his family, my mother, on Bolt Road, just around the corner here. So that's where our mum was born and raised. And so I went to Grove Street Kindergarten and St Joseph's School, and then to Nelson College, and then I took off in 1989. I took off to Canterbury to go to university. And after university, I worked in New Zealand for about 8 months in Christchurch and got itchy feet and managed to get a job living and working in China. So I worked in Shanghai from 1992 to 1995. I was in Shanghai in the days when it was booming. It was booming back then. It's still booming now.
Say good day in Chinese.
Ni hao. Ni hao, ma.
That's right.
So it's good to have someone giving it back, which is good. Good on you. So China back then had 20,000, at one stage in the ring roads of China, there was 20,000 elevator contracts up for tender at one time. 20,000 buildings were being built at one single time inside the city centre. It was phenomenal growth, phenomenal growth. And I think I probably had my first introduction to public performance was back then. I was at the Shanghai train station, and I was with an interpreter. He went to go get a taxi. And back then in Shanghai, there were very few white people around. At the train station, especially at Chinese New Year, full of Chinese people. We're talking like tens of thousands of people. And I was standing there on something pretty much like this, waiting for the taxi to come, and slowly a crowd started to draw near. They were all looking at this white person. They sort of couldn't believe their eyes. I would have had about 4,000 or 5,000 people in front of me. It was like the size of the football field at Trafalgar Park, all staring at me. And I've been there 10 minutes already, getting a little bit uncomfortable. So I did a little bit of a jig like this, and everyone burst out into laughter. And it carried on for about a good minute, and I did as well. And I stopped, and then it was quiet again. No one spoke, so I just did another 5 minutes. That was my first foray into public performance. So hopefully I don't. No, that's all right. That's all. That's good. So China was a fantastic place. And I worked basically. I was the chief representative officer for a clothing company. And my job was basically to make sure all the production left China and went to New Zealand and Australia and other parts around the world. And I did that for a while. Then I went to Australia in '95, and I ended up being the general manager for a clothing company in Australia, because Australia just deregulated. New Zealand had deregulated earlier. And after doing that for 3 years, it was a public company, a listed company, which was good, great experience. I decided to go out on my own. Because I was expecting my first child. I always wanted to be able to business my own, and everyone told me once you have kids, you don't like taking risks. So I thought I'd better do this quickly. So I went out on my own, and my wife was about a week from being due. She'd quit her job, and I said to her, honey, I've just quit my job and going out on a business of my own. I can tell you what, I didn't get the best reaction from her then. She stood by me, and within 2 or 3 months we were on our feet and we were going, so it was good, it was good. So that was in Sydney. An Australian wife, and I took her back to New Zealand in 2002. And we had 2 children. No, we had 2 children then in 2002. We had 2 kids, came back to Nelson. We had our 3rd when we were here. And I ran the business, I moved the business from Sydney to Nelson. And we had offices in Hong Kong and offices in China, and we exported garments and clothing and giftware pretty much all around the world. And I sold that in November, just gone. about 9 months ago, whatever it was. Sold the business, and now I'm sort of full-time, I hate to say it, full-time politician. Still, it's a hard sort of thing to accept, and I am a politician now. So if I wind the clock back a little bit to 2002, we moved to New Zealand to raise a family, basically, and for me to slow down a bit on the business I was doing in Sydney and China and the likes. And when I came here, I started, like my response to the gentleman there about the Rugby World Cup, I started noticing that not much had happened, which was good, because I started showing my kids, oh, this is where I went to school, hasn't changed. This is Trafalgar Park, where I watched Australia play cricket there. I watched all these sporting events. I watched the 1976 Olympian gold medalists all compete there at a field meet. And it was great to show my kids this place that I grew up in, you know, Observatory Hill, nothing had changed. But then when we lost WOW, and the community really enjoyed WOW, when we lost that, it was a bit of a downer. And I started thinking, well, that's not good. You know, why did we lose it, all the rest of it? And then I was up on the observatory with the kids queuing up to look at the telescope on Princess Drive, and we were standing out in the rain. And when we got inside, it was leaking. And I was thinking, why hasn't, it's great, nothing's changed, but literally nothing has changed. Nothing has been maintained. When I was fortunate enough to grow up in the 70s, when our forefathers had invested in this community, and I had facilities growing up here, which I was proud of, you know, and I talk to people around the world. Now I'm coming back, I'm showing my children, and the investment hasn't been put into those facilities. And then in 2005, when New Zealand won the rights to the Rugby World Cup, and Martin Sneddon was speaking about it, saying, this is New Zealand's one chance, one last chance to get on the world stage. Have a look at how Australia had came through holding the Olympics and Rugby World Cup. This is New Zealand's big chance. I thought, wow, Nelson, this is Nelson's last chance in New Zealand to actually get back on the radar, get back on the map so we can attract families and investment here. So I got shoulder tapped by Hands Up. And so I said, yes, I'm in. I was the first person to actually say, yeah, I want to run with you. So I ran with Hands Up, and we got in. And just so you know, we never lobbied or caucused as a group. The only time we did that is when I was the only person to do that, and I did that around Trafalgar Park and Rugby World Cup. We got all the Hands Up people in my office every week, because we had 11 months to upgrade the stadium and to get the Rugby World Cup bid in, which was every council meeting we had to hit hurdles. That was the only time we caucused. In my view, we probably should have done it more, but we took the line that no, we're one team now, all 12 of us, and we didn't caucus and we didn't lobby. Some people think that was a mistake, some don't, but we didn't lobby. So the first day on the job, I went and saw Susan Coleman, the Community Services head, and I said to her, what do we have to do to get this Rugby World Cup?